I never imagined that my wife of 3 years would, in front of everyone at 30,000 feet, grind me into the dirt and stomp on me. It started 3 weeks ago. During that time, Ye Zhiqiu was constantly working overtime, flying international routes. Every day she came home, collapsed into bed, and even one more sentence with me felt like a chore. She changed her phone password to 6 digits, took her phone into the bathroom when she showered, and placed it face down on the nightstand, like she was hiding some shameful secret. I'm no fool.
A man has a gut instinct about these things.
But I chose to stay silent, because Shengyu Airlines was in the middle of its most critical acquisition negotiation, and a 12 billion yuan capital pool couldn't afford the slightest distraction. This trip to Beijing was a last-minute decision. When my assistant Fang Yan booked the ticket, only economy class was left.
He called me, his voice trembling. Mister.
Should I reschedule for the next flight? There are still 2 seats in first class. I said it didn't matter. It was just a 2-hour trip, and I wasn't above flying economy. Fang Yan fell silent on the other end for 3 seconds. He was probably thinking about my habits over the years, always economy class when I went out, always a standard room when I stayed at a hotel, always wearing the same 5-year-old quartz watch on my wrist. Among all the mid-level and senior cadres at Shengyu Group, no one knew the He family had another son, and even fewer knew that son was about to become their boss. The moment I boarded, I spotted Ye Zhiqiu at once. She stood at the cabin door greeting passengers, wearing that navy blue flight attendant uniform, a red, white, and blue silk scarf tied around her neck, her hair pinned up impeccably, her makeup so flawless she looked like she was about to enter a beauty pageant. When she saw me, she froze for a split second. A flicker of surprise crossed her eyes. Then that surprise quickly morphed into a kind of inexplicable disgust. "What are you doing here?" she asked in a hushed voice, her tone as if she were interrogating a beggar who had no business being in a high-end restaurant. "Business trip to Beijing," I said.
On this flight?
Her eyebrows shot up. Her gaze swept over me, from my black jacket that it had been wearing for nearly 2 years, to the ordinary briefcase in my hand, and finally landed on the boarding pass I was holding. Her eyesight was excellent. She spotted the seat number printed on it instantly, row 42, seat B, third to last row in economy, aisle seat.
You're flying economy?
Her voice was neither too loud nor too soft, perfectly pitched for her colleagues and the passengers near the boarding door to hear. I didn't answer and walked straight inside. She didn't stop me, but I saw the expression on her face as clear as day. It was the kind of look a high society lady gives a cockroach that has crawled up from the sewer in her own home, disgusted and embarrassed, desperate to squash it and flush it away immediately. 40 minutes after takeoff, Ye Zhiqiu pushed the drink cart down the aisle. I was sitting in the rear of economy, on the aisle, reading the due diligence report for the acquisition. Shengyu Airlines' asset stripping plan had already reached its 7th version. The legal team had honed every clause to razor sharpness, waiting for my final signature. I had been reading this report the whole way. When I reached a key data point, my brow furrowed involuntarily. Flight safety investment had been declining for 3 consecutive years. 40% of the maintenance budget had been diverted to plug other holes. The issue of excessive flight hours for frontline pilots had become so severe that it could ignite a public opinion firestorm at any moment. A pair of black high heels stopped in front of me. I looked up and saw Ye Zhiqiu's exquisite face. She was wearing heavy makeup, her red lips slightly curled, and in her eyes was a gleam I hadn't seen in 3 years. A look of lofty, condescending contempt.
Something to drink?
Her voice was as cold as ice.
Just water is fine.
She handed over a cup of water, her fingers pinching the very bottom of the cup, as if even the thought of touching my hand repulsed her. Then, instead of walking away immediately, she stood beside me and loud enough for the passengers in the surrounding 3 rows to hear, said, "He Yanshen, you're a 30-year-old man, and you can't even spring for a business class ticket.
Aren't you afraid of being a laughingstock?"
The passengers around us turned to look. The middle-aged man in the window seat next to me took off his headphones. The young mother with a child in the row ahead glanced back. Even the middle-aged man across the aisle who had been dozing the entire time opened his eyes. "Last-minute booking."
Couldn't get one?
I said, my voice very calm. "Give me a break." Ye Zhiqiu laughed, a sound as brittle as shattering glass.
You just don't have what it takes.
"That pittance you earn in a month? Is it even enough for a few business class tickets? My allowance from a single international route is higher than your monthly salary." I was truly blind back then.
How did I ever marry someone like you?
I stayed silent and didn't argue, not because I felt guilty, but because I wanted to see just how far this woman who had shared my bed for 3 years would go in front of complete strangers. Sometimes a man doesn't need a private investigator to see the truth of his marriage. He only needs a pair of eyes willing to open. Miss, how can you talk to your husband like that? A middle-aged woman nearby couldn't hold back any longer and spoke up in a heavy northeastern accent. It doesn't matter how much a man earns. What matters is that he treats his wife well.
What are you doing?
Ye Zhiqiu glanced at the woman, her smirk growing even more caustic.
Auntie, you don't understand.
With some people, it's not a matter of earning more or less. They're rotten to the core and can't be helped. Do you know the most expensive thing he has given me in 3 years of marriage? An 800 yuan silver necklace. 800 yuan. My colleagues' husbands give them Cartier and Van Cleef.
What do I get?
The woman was choked into silence. She opened her mouth but couldn't find any words. Seeing this, Ye Zhiqiu grew even more smug. She turned back to me and continued, He Yanshen, after this flight I need to have a serious talk with you.
My parents were right.
I never should have married you. You are simply not worthy of me. With that, she pushed her cart and strode off, the sound of her high heels echoing through the cabin for a long while. The northeastern woman next to me glanced at me cautiously and lowered her voice. Young man, don't take it to heart.
Your wife just has a sharp tongue.
Maybe the work stress is getting to her. It's all right, auntie.
I gave her a slight smile.
You're right. Treating your wife well is what matters. It's a pity some people just aren't worth the kindness. The woman paused, not quite catching my meaning. I didn't plan to explain. Ye Zhiqiu pushed her cart through the curtain and into the first-class cabin. Between economy and first class hung a dark blue curtain, a boundary line dividing the people inside this metal tube into 2 separate worlds. On this side were cramped seats and cheap boxed meals. On the other side were spacious lie-flat seats and chilled champagne. Through the gap in the curtain, I saw everything clearly. Sitting in the first row of first class was a man in an Armani suit, probably in his early 30s, his hair combed immaculately, a Patek Philippe on his wrist glittering under the cabin lights. He was leaning back in the wide leather seat, legs crossed, his posture as lazy as a satiated cat. The moment Ye Zhiqiu pushed her cart up to him, her entire demeanor changed. Her shoulders tilted slightly forward, her waist curved into a perfect, inviting arc, and the smile on her face was so radiant she looked like a completely different person. She handed him a glass of orange juice, her voice cloyingly sweet.
Mr. Lin, your orange juice.
I added ice, especially for you. The temperature is just perfect. The man called Mr. Lin took the glass, his fingers deliberately brushing against the back of Ye Zhiqiu's hand, lingering for at least 3 seconds. Ye Zhiqiu didn't pull away. Instead, her smile grew even sweeter, the fine lines at the corners of her eyes crinkling.
Zhiqiu, you're so thoughtful.
Mr. Lin's voice wasn't loud, but the hum of the engines somehow carried every word to me clearly. I really like flight attendants like you, attentive service and beautiful too. By the way, I heard you talking to someone back there just now.
Something about a husband?
Ye Zhiqiu visibly stiffened. She glanced back toward economy, checking that the curtain was still drawn. Then she turned back and said dismissively, "Oh, just an old neighbor.
I've known him since I was little.
He hasn't amounted to much, just a small-time clerk at some tiny company. Happened to be on this flight, so we chatted a bit.
An old neighbor.
A small-time clerk. Haven't amounted to much." The northeastern woman beside me heard this as well. She turned her head to look at me, her expression as if someone had shoved a fly into her mouth. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but in the end she just sighed heavily and patted my arm.
Sorry you had to hear that, mister.
Lin. Ye Zhiqiu's voice continued drifting over from first class. Let's not talk about him.
Tell me about you, mister.
Lin. Are you heading to Beijing on business? Yes. Negotiating a merger and acquisition project. Mr. Lin's voice carried a deliberate casualness. A small project, just over 3 billion, just messing around. You know, Zhiqiu, since you're laying over in Beijing for a couple of days after this flight, how about we have dinner together? I know a 3 Michelin star place in Beijing that's notoriously hard to book, but for Lin Group, it's just a phone call. Oh my, Mr.
Lin, you're too kind.
But I am indeed staying in Beijing for 2 days this time, so I'll graciously accept your invitation. Ye Zhiqiu's voice was sickeningly sweet, every word like poison dipped in honey. For the next 20 minutes, I sat in the back of economy and watched my own wife chatting and laughing with another man in first class. She refilled his orange juice 3 times, adjusted his seat back for him, and even crouched down to explain how the first-class entertainment system worked, their faces nearly touching. Finally, she even pulled out her phone and beaming, scanned Mr. Lin's WeChat QR code. Mr. Lin added you. You can send me the restaurant address later.
Definitely.
By the way, Zhiqiu, are you married?
Oh my, Mr.
Lin, why do you ask? A person like me who's always flying around, who would want me? Ye Zhiqiu said with a laugh, a coquettish lilt in her voice. A beautiful flight attendant like you, no one wants you? Then I want stand on ceremony. Mr. Lin laughed, his laughter full of flirtation. Through it all, she never once looked back at me. 20 minutes later, she pushed her cart back and paused when she passed my seat. She looked down at me, no trace of guilt in her eyes, only a justified and indifferent coldness. I exchanged WeChat with Mr. Lin Yuchen of the Lin Group. Don't overthink it.
In maintaining client relations.
First-class passengers are all high-end resources. Something a person who flies economy like you wouldn't understand.
You don't need to explain, I said without looking up.
I don't interfere in your work matters.
Ye Zhiqiu's expression flickered. She had probably expected me to get angry, to be jealous, to question why she had lied and called me a neighbor. But I said nothing, and this calmness actually unsettled her, like punching a ball of cotton with nowhere for the force to land.
What do you mean?
She lowered her voice.
Are you being sarcastic? I said, you don't need to explain.
I closed the report and looked at her calmly. Ye Zhiqiu, you don't need to explain anything you do to me.
You didn't need to before, and you need to even less now.
You! She bit her lip, her expression as if she had swallowed a live frog. He Yanshen, I hate it most when you act like this.
Look at yourself.
Any other man seeing his wife talking to another guy would have jumped up already.
And you?
You don't even dare to let out a fart.
What the hell are you?
She turned and pushed her cart away, her high heels stomping hard on the floor, every step feeling like it was stomping on my face. I watched her retreating figure and thought back to our wedding 3 years ago. Back then she had just graduated from flight attendant school, a ponytail swinging, no makeup on, and when she smiled, her 2 little canine teeth showed, making her look like an innocent little white rabbit. She had held my hand and said, Yanshen, from now on I'm yours. I'll be a good wife, give you children, and spend the rest of my life with you. 3 years was enough time to turn a little white rabbit into a thankless wretch, and also enough time for a man who had been biding his time for 3 years to launch a silent, decisive counterstrike. The plane continued flying smoothly. I reopened the due diligence report. On page 127, Shengyu Airlines' updated equity structure chart was complete. All the acquirer's funds were in place, and the tripartite agreement at the custodian bank was only missing my final signature. Once I signed that name, Shengyu Airlines, one of the top 3 private airlines in the country, would officially be incorporated under He Asset Management Group. The power to appoint and dismiss all executives, the operational decision-making authority of the company, and even the labor contract of every single flight attendant would all fall under my control. And Ye Zhiqiu, my lawful wife, her labor contract was stamped precisely with the seal of Shengyu Airlines. Her employee badge pinned to her chest read, Shengyu Airlines, Purser, Ye Zhiqiu. Every minute she served on this plane today, every cent of salary she earned, was essentially given by me. Sometimes the world is just this ironic. So ironic you have to believe fate is deliberately toying with people. I took out my phone and sent Fang Yan a message. The due diligence report is fine.
Signing tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Also, book a divorce registration appointment at the Civil Affairs Bureau. The sooner the better. Fang Yan replied instantly, received Mr. He.
Should I notify the legal department to prepare the divorce agreement in advance?
Prepare it.
Write the terms clearly. The party guilty of infidelity leaves the marriage with nothing.
Understood.
I turned off my phone, leaned back in the uncomfortable economy seat, and closed my eyes. Outside the window, the clouds were as white as cotton candy, and sunlight streamed through, casting a golden glow inside the cabin. This flight still had 1 hour and 40 minutes left.
I plan to get some good rest.
Because after this plane landed, everything would be different. The incident happened without any warning when the plane entered Hebei airspace. I was leaning back in my seat, resting my eyes, my fingers tapping the armrest unconsciously as I ran through the last key points of the acquisition in my head. Suddenly, the fuselage felt like it had been slapped hard by a giant hand reaching down from the clouds. The entire plane plunged downward by at least 20 meters. That feeling is impossible to describe. It's like riding an elevator when the cable suddenly snaps. In an instant, all your internal organs rush to your throat. Your body lifts off the seat, and you're in a momentary state of weightlessness. My stomach flipped upside down, a loud buzz filled my ears, and my mind went completely blank. The cabin instantly erupted into chaos. A woman's shrill scream tore through the cabin, the sound so sharp it stabbed right into everyone's eardrums. The young mother in the row ahead of me was thrown upward, her head smashing into the overhead luggage compartment with a sickening thud. A gash immediately split open on her forehead, and bright red blood streamed down her cheek, dripping onto the face of the child in her arms. The little girl, probably 3 or 4 years old, froze for a second, then burst into heart-wrenching wails. The coffee cup in the hand of the middle-aged man across the aisle went flying. Scalding coffee splashed all over his face and body, making him howl in pain as he frantically tore at his soaked shirt. Someone in the back began vomiting, and the sour stench quickly permeated the cabin. The oxygen masks overhead dropped down with a clatter, rows and rows of yellow masks swinging limply in midair, the scene as eerie as a horror movie. The seatbelt sign flashed frantically. The shrill sound of alarms mixed with the screams of passengers, and the entire cabin seemed like it had been thrown into a boiling pot of oil. At that moment, Ye Zhiqiu was standing in the middle of the aisle. She had just delivered a blanket to a passenger in the back, and was still holding another one in her hand. She stumbled on the first jolt, barely catching a seat back, but then a second, stronger jolt hit. Her high heels slipped on the slanted floor, and she went flying toward the tail of the plane like a kite with its string cut. She tumbled at least 3 meters down the aisle, her knee slamming into a seat's armrest, making her scream in pain. Her hair came undone, her once immaculate bun now lopsided, her scarf loosened and hanging around her neck like a rag. She scrambled to grab onto something to steady herself, but the plane lurched a third time, and she slid completely onto the floor, her back slamming into the lavatory door. I reached out and grabbed her arm firmly. When she fell into my arms, her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. The haughty expression from moments ago had vanished completely. All her arrogance and harshness were gone, replaced by pure, undisguised terror. Her body was trembling violently, her lips quivering, her teeth chattering audibly. "Clear air turbulence," I said, my voice very low, but she heard me. This wasn't my first time encountering this situation. Shengyu Airlines pilot training system had been established single-handedly by my father, He Yanshen, who was one of the first in the country to introduce full-motion flight simulators. I grew up in those simulators and had responses to these emergencies ingrained in me. Clear air turbulence is one of the most dangerous weather phenomena in aviation. It comes without any warning and can't be detected by radar. It's like a trap laid by the heavens in a perfectly clear sky, waiting for the plane to fall into it. The plane jolted violently twice more. The latches on the overhead bins couldn't withstand the stress, and a black carry-on suitcase, weighing at least 7 or 8 kilograms, burst open and came crashing down, heading straight for Ye Zhiqiu's head. I raised my arm to block it. The suitcase slammed into my forearm, sending a dull, deep pain radiating from the bone that made me suck in a sharp breath.
Yanshen!
Ye Zhiqiu screamed. "Everyone fasten your seatbelts. Stay in your seats." She finally snapped back to her senses, her professional instincts pulling her out of the fear. She struggled out of my arms, got to her feet using the seatbacks for support, and began calming the passengers with a trembling voice. "Please fasten your seatbelts immediately.
Put on your oxygen masks.
Please remain calm." But her voice was shaking.
Every word trembled.
Her hands were shaking too, so much that she could barely hold onto a seatbelt. The captain's steady voice came over the intercom.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Zhou Jianhua.
"We have encountered clear air turbulence. All passengers, please return to your seats immediately and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, please secure yourselves in the nearest available location."
Repeat. Flight attendants, please secure yourselves.
Zhou Jianhua sounded calm, but I detected an unusual tension in his tone.
I had known old Joe for over 15 years. He was my father's prize student, had flown commercial aviation for 25 years, and had seen every kind of weather. A situation that would make him tense was no ordinary turbulence. No sooner had he spoken than the plane began another round of violent shaking. This was fiercer than all the previous jolts. The fuselage emitted a gut-wrenching metallic groaning sound, creaking and groaning as if an invisible hand was wringing this metal tube with all its might. The screams in the cabin were almost loud enough to blow the roof off. Some people were crying, some were shouting for help, some were making phone calls with trembling voices to say goodbye to their families, and a young man was loudly reciting the Heart Sutra, his voice cracking with tears. Ye Zhiqiu clung desperately to the back of a seat, her body swinging back and forth with the plane's movements, like a leaf ravaged by a storm. Her high heels had been kicked off somewhere. The knees of her stockings were torn in 2 large holes, revealing bloodied skin. Her face was a mess of sweat and tears, her exquisite makeup ruined into a smear, her eyeliner smudged into two black halos around her eyes. Against her ghostly pale face, she looked like a terrified clown. Yet I remained sitting steadily in my seat. Not because I was lucky, or because I wasn't afraid. Anyone would be afraid. It's not a question of courage. It's the most primal human response in the face of extreme danger. I could maintain my center of gravity because I knew exactly how to sit in this situation. Feet flat on the floor, knees slightly bent, body's center of gravity lowered, hands braced on the seat back in front. These movements had been etched into my muscle memory. I could do them without thinking. My father once told me something I've never forgotten in my life. He said, Yanshen, a real man is not someone who isn't afraid, but someone who stands even firmer the more afraid he is. When the storm is at its fiercest, you have to make people feel like you're a solid stake in the ground. Suddenly Ye Zhiqiu shouted my name. Yanshen, she yelled those two syllables, her voice carrying an emotion I hadn't heard in 3 years. It wasn't anger, wasn't contempt, wasn't impatience. It was fear. A person with nowhere to hide in a storm had instinctively called out the most familiar name she knew. I'm scared, she said, tears rolling down her red-rimmed eyes, carving two pale tracks through her ruined makeup. I looked into her eyes and nodded. Just then, the cockpit door opened. The moment that door opened, every gaze in the cabin converged on it. Out walked a middle-aged man in a uniform with 4 stripes on the epaulets. He was not tall, but his back was ramrod straight, his shoulders broad as a door plank. His hair was already half white, and the wrinkles on his face were carved as deep as knife marks. This was Ye Zhiqiu, the most senior captain at Shengyu Airlines, with over 20,000 flight hours and a safety record ranked among the top 3 in the industry. Behind him were the purser and 2 first officers. The purser's face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line, clutching a megaphone. The 2 first officers were younger. One of them, who looked only about 27 or 28, was clearly not in good shape. His forehead was beaded with sweat, his pupils slightly dilated, his gait unsteady. Everyone remain calm, the purser shouted through the megaphone, but her voice betrayed a panic she couldn't hide. Captain Zhou ignored everyone else. His eyes swept across the chaotic, noisy cabin like radar, locking onto the rear of economy class. Then he strode forward, navigating the slanted floor, walking quickly in my direction. Everyone was watching him. Ye Zhiqiu was watching him too. She was half kneeling in the aisle, one hand gripping an armrest, the other covering her bleeding knee. She watched the captain march briskly toward her, her expression first showing confusion, then anticipation. She probably thought he was coming for her. After all, she was the only purser on this flight. In an emergency, the standard procedure was for the captain to come out and confirm the cabin situation with the purser. She struggled to stand up, trying to restore some semblance of professionalism. She wiped her smeared makeup with the back of her hand, straightened her back, and opened her mouth, ready to report. But the captain didn't even glance at her. Zhou Jianhua stopped right in front of me. He brought his feet together, raised his right hand with fingers together, fingertips aligned with his temple, and executed a standard, impeccable military salute. The entire cabin instantly fell silent. It was an almost surreal silence, as if someone had pressed the pause button. All the screaming, crying, and retching ceased in that moment. Even the young man reciting the Heart Sutra shut his mouth. The roar of the engines echoed monotonously at 30,000 feet, the only sound left in the entire space. Everyone was looking at me. The northeastern woman's jaw dropped, the mint candy in her mouth almost falling out. The young mother in the front row with the bleeding forehead forgot to wipe the blood from her face, turning her head dumbly. The middle-aged man across the aisle who had been scalded by coffee froze in mid-motion, a wad of tissue in his hand, like a statue. The expression on Ye Zhiqiu's face is something I will never forget for the rest of my life. She was frozen in that pose of trying to stand, knees bent, hands braced on the floor, body leaning forward, her mouth a perfect O, her eyes wide as searchlights. Her expression underwent a rapid transformation in the span of a single second, cycling from confusion to shock to total collapse. The emotions layered on her face, piling up like a silent avalanche.
Old Joe, what's the situation?
I unbuckled my seatbelt and stood up, one hand steadying myself on a swaying seatback. Captain Zhou lowered his saluting hand, his expression extremely grim. Sweat trickled down the furrows of his wrinkles, but he didn't bother to wipe it. Speaking rapidly, he said, "Mr. He, the autopilot system malfunctioned 5 minutes ago. Both the primary and secondary weather radars have failed. We are unable to detect the meteorological conditions in the airspace ahead. Even worse, we've been sucked into the core of a severe turbulence zone.
Manual control is extremely difficult.
He paused, lowered his voice, and added, I've contacted ground control, but the nearest available airport for landing is in Shijiazhuang, at least 40 minutes away. Mr. He, for these 40 minutes to be honest, am not fully confident. Who is handling manual control right now? I asked.
Old Juice's expression stiffened.
In a voice almost too faint to hear, he said, First Officer Zhao Chen. This kid just got his license last year. He has less than 300 hours of simulator training. Has never experienced anything like this. During the worst of the turbulence, he nearly passed out.
Right now, he's holding on purely by instinct.
I took a deep breath. Autopilot failure, weather radar paralysis, a severe turbulence zone, an inexperienced first officer, and a 40-minute flight time stack these 4 factors together, and it's enough to make any captain despair.
What do you need me to do?
I looked old Joe in the eye. Mr. He, I know this request is against regulations, but I truly have no other choice. Old Joe's voice carried a tone close to pleading. I need you in the cockpit to assist me with manual control and instrument monitoring. You hold a private pilot's license, you've logged 3,000 hours in simulators, and your familiarity with the G550 aircraft type is no less than mine.
He was telling the truth.
12 years ago, my father took me into Shengyu's flight simulation center for the first time. That day, I sat in the simulator and flew for 8 hours straight, even having the staff bring my meals in. Since then, every year it'd take time to log simulator hours. From the oldest Boeing 737 to the latest Gulfstream G550, I knew the cockpit layout of every aircraft type like the back of my hand. Let's go.
No more words.
I patted old Joe on the shoulder. As I turned, I glanced at Ye Zhiqiu. She was still in that same posture, half kneeling in the aisle, clutching an armrest so tightly. Her knuckles had turned an unnatural bluish white. She looked up at me, her lips trembling violently, as if she wanted to say something, but only fragmented gasps came from her throat. You. She finally squeezed out a single word. Ye Zhiqiu, return to your post. My voice was calm, like I was addressing an ordinary purser. It was only then that old Joe followed my gaze and noticed Ye Zhiqiu. He paused, clearly surprised by her disheveled state.
Purser, Ye?
Are you all right? You know, Mr.
He.
What, Mr.
He.
Ye Zhiqiu's voice quivered, each word sounding like it was forced out from deep in her throat.
Old Joe looked even more puzzled. He glanced at me, then back at her, his tone carrying obvious bewilderment.
You didn't know.
Mr. He Yanshen, the newly appointed chairman of Shengyu Airlines and the new owner of the entire Shengyu Group.
This aircraft and everyone on board is now Mr.
He's asset.
This sentence detonated like a thunderclap in the silent cabin. Someone gasped audibly, the sound crystal clear in the hush. Some people pulled out their phones and started taking photos, the shutter clicks flashing repeatedly. Others murmured among themselves, their voices low, but in the eerie silence, every word was heard distinctly. Didn't that flight attendant just say he was a neighbor?
Said he was a small-time clerk?
What the heck is going on?
Ye Zhiqiu's face underwent 3 color changes within seconds. First, it flushed red, as if she'd been slapped. Then it drained to a ghostly white, paler than when the plane was shaking. Finally, it settled into an indescribable ashen gray, a color I had only seen once before on the face of a terminal cancer patient I had visited in the hospital. Her body began to tremble intensely, even more violently than during the turbulence. Impossible. Her voice was sharp and thin like nails on a chalkboard. This is absolutely impossible.
You're lying to me.
You must be lying.
He's just an ordinary employee. He hasn't changed jobs in 3 years. He takes the bus everywhere. He won't even buy me a decent handbag.
How could he possibly be? She stopped mid-sentence.
Because old Zhu's expression was simply too serious. I've known Zhou Jianhua for 15 years, and I've never seen him crack a joke. He's been a captain for 25 years. In his entire career, has never had a single violation, never been late or left early, never even spoken to a passenger in a tone that wasn't entirely proper. Getting him to cooperate in an act of pretending him the chairman would be harder than making him fly a plane upside down. Mr. He, shall we? Old Zhou looked at me, unwilling to engage with her further.
Let's go.
I didn't look at Ye Zhiqiu again and followed old Zhou toward the cockpit. Behind me, Ye Zhiqiu's voice rang out, a sound like someone was strangling her. Wait a minute, Yanshen. He Yanshen!
Don't go.
Explain this to me.
I didn't look back. The cockpit door closed behind me, cutting off all the commotion and screams from the cabin. The situation inside the cockpit was worse than I had imagined. The instrument panels were a dense, flashing forest of warning lights. Red, orange, yellow, like a Christmas tree gone haywire. Alarms beeped incessantly, merging with the rhythm of a racing heartbeat, grating on the nerves. The main display's weather radar interface was a screen of static, showing nothing, like a broken TV with no signal. First Officer Xiao Chen's seat was soaked through with sweat. He was a young-looking guy, 27 or 28, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, the acne on his face not yet fully faded. The hands gripping the control yoke had veins bulging, both hands trembling violently, his knuckles white from the force, his lips were purple, his pupils dilated, his breathing shallow and rapid, classic symptoms of hyperventilation. If this continued, he would pass out completely. Xiao Chen, I've got it. Old Zhou settled back into the captain's seat and reached out, gripping the yoke with both steady hands. Xiao Chen let go as if he'd been shocked. He collapsed back in his seat, gasping for air, his chest heaving like a fish thrown onto a riverbank. I sat down in the first officer's seat, my movements so practiced it even surprised me. Adjust the seat distance.
Fasten the 5-point harness.
Check the instrument panel power status. Activate the backup weather radar startup sequence. This routine was too familiar, like riding a bike. Once you learn, you never forget.
I had earned my private pilot's license 10 years ago.
I had just returned from abroad after finishing a master's in finance, and my father enrolled me in a flight training program, saying, the men of the He family, no matter what they do in the future, must know how to fly a plane. I spent 6 months earning my license and then 2 more years flying simulators for every aircraft type under Shengyu Airlines.
Backup weather radar initializing.
Estimated 20 seconds to complete self-test, I reported.
Copy.
Old Zhu's voice was as steady as a mountain. His hands gripped the yoke, those hands calloused and wrinkled, yet incredibly stable amidst the violent shaking. Under his control, the plane gradually transitioned from severe jolts to smaller tremors. It was still shaking, but at least it no longer felt like it was about to fall apart at any moment.
Mr.
He'll be straight with you.
Old Zhou spoke while maneuvering the plane, his voice kept low, as if afraid the cockpit voice recorder would pick it up. The number of flight incidents at Shengyu has been rising these past 2 years. 12 last year alone, and it's only halfway through this year, and we're already at 9. Do you know how severe the excessive flight hours issue is for frontline pilots? The worst month, one pilot flew 220 hours. That averages over 7 hours a day for 30 days straight with no rest. They are trading human lives for money. God damn it. Old Zhou rarely ever cursed. This was the first time he had used profanity in front of me. And the maintenance budget, slashed by 40%. Suppressed anger colored his voice. Engine parts due for replacement aren't replaced. Pushed another 200 hours, saying one more flight earns another 300,000. 300,000, Mr.
He.
A human life is worth more than 300,000, let alone nearly 200 lives on a plane.
I know all of this.
I stared at the progress bar for the backup weather radar. After the acquisition is complete, the first order of business is a comprehensive overhaul of the safety management system. All budgets will be restored to their required levels. For real, and not just restored, but exceeding industry standards. My voice was calm, but every word landed with weight. Shengyu's safety investment from now on will benchmark against top international airlines. Pilot duty hours will be strictly capped. Any management that violates the overtime rules will be dismissed directly. This was my father's rule. Whoever compromises flight safety is the enemy of Shengyu. The backup weather radar screen lit up. Real-time meteorological data began to load. Old Zhou was silent for a long moment, so long I thought he wasn't going to speak again. Then, in a very soft voice, he said, Mr. He, back when your father, if he hadn't been on that plane, not one of those 173 people would have survived. I know, I said. Of course I knew. Every detail of what happened 15 years ago was crystal clear in my memory. That day, my father, He Yanshen, was piloting a Shengyu Airlines flight from Chengdu to Guangzhou. At 30,000 feet, he suddenly experienced a dual-engine failure. This situation has occurred fewer than 20 times in aviation history. Successful emergency landings after such an event number only 3. The results of the other 17 were all the same. The plane crashed. Everyone on board perished. My father accomplished one of those 3 successful emergency landings. He flew a massive aircraft that had lost all power, gliding through 30 kilometers of mountainous terrain, and finally landed on a dry riverbed. The plane broke into 3 sections, but there was no fire, no explosion. All 173 people survived. He himself broke 7 ribs, suffered 3 compressed vertebrae and an intracranial hemorrhage, and lay in the ICU for 42 days. After that, he could never fly again. A senior captain with over 15,000 flight hours bid farewell to the blue sky forever. I was 12 years old when that happened. I remember it vividly. I came home from school that day to find the house full of people. My mother held me and cried all night. I stood outside the glass window of the ICU, looking at my father covered in tubes.
He didn't cry.
Instead, he gave me a thumbs up and pulled a smile through the corner of his mouth. Later, he told me something I've never forgotten in my life. He said, Yanshen, being a pilot is not a profession, it's a responsibility. What you carry on your shoulders are not epaulets, but the families of over 100 people.
Mr.
Weather data, loading complete. Old Juice voice pulled me back from my memories. I shook my head and focused on the screen. The backup weather radar's holographic image had finished refreshing. The cloud structure of the airspace ahead was now clear at a glance. My eyes swept over the dense clusters of data points, and my heart sank. Strong turbulence core 15 kilometers ahead, diameter approximately 40 kilometers. Cloud layer structure extremely unstable. Vertical movement speed exceeding 25 meters per second. My fingers moved quickly across the screen. If we punch through, the structural stress on the aircraft will exceed 3 times the design limit. Then what do we do? Xiao Chen's voice was tearful. Can't we go around?
We can go around.
I zoomed in on the topographic map. Recommend a course deviation of 30 degrees, detouring to the north. It will increase the distance by about 120 kilometers, but we can completely avoid the turbulence core. The cost is an extra 15 minutes of flying time. Is the fuel sufficient? Old Joe glanced at the fuel gauge. Sufficient. Well, still have at least an hour and a half of reserve fuel after landing. Then let's go around, I said.
Copy.
Old Joe adjusted the heading without hesitation.
The plane began to bank gracefully to the left, like a migratory bird adjusting its course. The amplitude of the turbulence diminished noticeably, and the engine's roar smoothed out. Xiao Chen let out a long breath and slumped in his seat, his glasses fogged with moisture. Mr. You truly are the lifeline Shengyu has been waiting for, Old Joe said from the heart. In 3 years, we've had 3 chairmen, each worse than the last. The first just held meetings and made empty promises. The second busied himself with capital manipulations to hollow out the company. The third was even more ridiculous. On his first day, he ordered 3 armored cars for himself, saying he was afraid of being targeted by enemies. Flight safety investment was cut again and again. The front line was seething with discontent. If things went on like that, Shengyu was bound for a major disaster sooner or later. It's done. I pulled out my phone from my inner pocket. Even though it was in airplane mode, offline files were still viewable. I pulled up the signed acquisition agreement and held it up for Old Joe to see. Old Joe squinted, made out the signature and official seal at the bottom of the document, and let out a long, heavy sigh of relief, as if expelling 3 years' worth of pent-up frustration in one breath.
Thank heavens, Old Joe said.
Shengyu is saved.
Right at that moment, a piercing scream came from the cabin. The sound penetrated the cockpit's soundproof door and drilled into my ears. The frequency was high and sharp, laced with a hysterical madness. I knew that voice all too well. For the past 3 years, whenever she threw a tantrum and smashed things, that was the exact sound she made. It was Ye Zhiqiu.
He Yanshen.
Come out here. How dare you deceive me for 3 years? How dare you?
Come out and explain yourself.
This was followed by the sounds of the purser and other passengers trying to calm her down. Chaotic footsteps and a man's gruff shout. Ma'am, please calm down. The plane is still experiencing turbulence. This is very dangerous. Old Joe glanced at me, his gaze meaningful. I didn't move. My fingers continued operating on the instrument panel. The deviation route on the weather radar had been fully programmed, and the aircraft's attitude was gradually stabilizing. The warning lights in the cockpit began to extinguish one by one, shifting from red to yellow and from yellow to green, like a long torrential rain finally beginning to clear up. Old Joe, make the announcement, I said. Old Joe nodded, cleared his throat, and pressed the cabin broadcast button. His voice resonated throughout the aircraft. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Zhou Jinhua. After emergency handling, the aircraft has successfully navigated around the turbulence core. The flight is currently stable. We expect to land safely at Beijing Capital International Airport in 25 minutes. This flight encountered severe clear air turbulence, which has caused alarm and inconvenience. On behalf of the entire crew, I extend our sincerest apologies. He paused, glanced in my direction, and continued, at the same time, on behalf of all the pilots and flight attendants of Shengyu Airlines, I would like to express special thanks to the newly appointed chairman of Shengyu Airlines, Mr. He Yanshen. During this emergency, he voluntarily entered the cockpit to assist the flight crew in completing emergency procedures. With his professional aviation skills and calm judgment, he ensured the safety of all passengers on this flight. Shengyu Airlines thanks you.
The broadcast ended.
Old Joe switched off the button. Silence filled the cockpit for 3 seconds. Then thunderous applause and cheers erupted from the cabin. The sound was so loud that even the cockpit's soundproof door couldn't block it out, surging in like waves. People were shouting, "Thank you, Captain," shouting "Thank you, Mr. He," and some were even whistling. The entire cabin boiled over like a pot of water coming to a rolling boil. Old Joe turned to look at me, a fine smile line appearing at the corner of his eye.
Mr.
He, listen, that's the voice of the people. You saved their lives. They will remember you for the rest of their lives. I didn't speak. I leaned back in the first officer's seat and let out a long breath. Outside the window, the clouds began to thin. Golden sunlight streamed through the gaps, casting a warm glow inside the cockpit. The turbulence faded, diminishing until it was almost imperceptible. The flight became smooth and comfortable once more, like a great ship that had sailed out of the heart of a storm. And I knew my own storm was just beginning. The deviation was executed smoothly. The plane wove through the gaps in the clouds, like an agile eagle. Old Juice's hands were steady, the control yoke like an embroidery needle in his grip, precisely managing every minute change in the aircraft's attitude. This feel wasn't something you could teach through training. It was an intuition forged over decades of flying experience, a memory embedded deep in the muscles. I sat in the first officer's seat, my fingers gliding across the backup system screen, monitoring the weather radar data in real time. The turbulence core was slowly moving southeast, perfectly missing our current trajectory. Just 20 more minutes, and we would completely clear the danger zone. Xiao Chen had recovered from his hyperventilation, his color gradually returning to normal. He took off his fogged glasses and wiped them with his sleeve, stealing glances at me as he did so. His eyes filled with a mix of confusion and awe, like a new recruit who suddenly discovers the comrade standing next to him during drill is actually a special forces legend.
Mr.
He, may I ask you a question? Xiao Chen finally couldn't contain himself, his voice still a little weak.
Ask.
You're a dignified airline chairman.
Why would you get a pilot's license?
And log all those simulator hours?
Don't most bosses just? He caught himself mid-sentence and swallowed the rest of his words. Just sit in an office, drink coffee, and read reports? I finished his sentence for him and smiled.
Because I'm not your average boss.
Xiao Chen scratched his head sheepishly.
My father's rule.
I shut down the backup system, confirming all data had been synced to the main console. The men of the He family, no matter what they do, must learn to fly a plane. He said you can only truly understand what a pilot faces when you sit in the cockpit yourself, with your hands on the yoke. Understand the pilot, and you can run an airline.
Your father is? Xiao Chen asked carefully.
He Yanshen.
Old Joe answered for me, his voice carrying unmistakable respect. The founder of Shengyu Airlines, the He Yanshen who executed that emergency landing on a riverbed 15 years ago, saving 173 lives. Xiao Chen nearly dropped his glasses. He whipped his head around to stare at me, his mouth agape wide enough to fit an egg, the confusion in his eyes instantly converting to utter shock.
You're He Yanshen's son?
He Yanshen is my idol. I went to flight school because of him. That emergency landing case is still the first lesson in our training textbook to this day.
Then you'd better fly well?
I looked him in the eye. Don't embarrass your idol. Xiao Chen nodded vigorously, his head bobbing like a chicken pecking at rice. The light in his eyes reignited. The fear that had nearly broken him moments ago vanished without a trace, replaced by the excitement of having something ignited within him. Mr. He, old Joe suddenly spoke, his tone turning a bit subtle. That purser out there, Ye Zhiqiu, she and you my wife, I said, soon to be ex-wife. 3 seconds of silence filled the cockpit. Old Juice's expression didn't change much. After all, after 25 years of flying, he had seen too many people and too many things to know what to ask and what not to ask. Xiao Chen, however, didn't have that level of composure. His face looked like he had swallowed a fly. He opened his mouth to say something, then thought better of it, ultimately just letting out an ambiguous, say what's on your mind, I said looking at him.
Mr.
He then ill really say it. Xiao Chen swallowed hard and gathered his courage. Before the turbulence hit, I was listening to the cabin monitoring audio in the cockpit, not eavesdropping on purpose. The cockpit voice system records it automatically, and I heard Purser Ye telling a male passenger named Lin in first class. He trailed off again, his expression that of someone struggling to control himself from saying too much.
Saying what?
My tone was very calm. That she was unmarried. Xiao Chen gritted his teeth and spilled it all. And she said you were her old neighbor. Someone she'd known since childhood, who hadn't amounted to much, just a small-time clerk at some tiny company. Old Ju's hand paused on the yoke. The cockpit was silent for several seconds. Only the soft hum of the instruments and the steady roar of the engines filling the space. Then in a voice so soft it was barely audible, Old Joe said something that nonetheless rang out crystal clear in the quiet cockpit. That woman is blind.
I didn't respond.
Not because I didn't want to, but because there was nothing to say. Whether Ye Zhiqiu was blind or not no longer mattered to me. From the moment she first betrayed this marriage, she ceased to be my wife in my heart. 3 years was time enough to digest all my emotions. What remained now was a calm, almost cold-blooded resolution. Outside the window, the clouds had fully dispersed. Sunlight poured into the cockpit without hindrance, illuminating every instrument panel and every lever. I could see the ground clearly now. The outline of the Yanshen Mountains was faintly visible on the horizon, like a sleeping dragon. Mr. He, 20 minutes to landing, Old Joe said. Would you like to go out and check on the cabin? After that kind of turbulence, there might be injured passengers. All right. I unbuckled my 5-point harness and stood up from the first officer's seat. The moment I opened the cockpit door, every gaze in the cabin converged on me once again. This time, the looks were completely different. Before, those gazes had held curiosity, confusion, and suspicion. Now they were filled with gratitude, admiration, and a kind of fervent, almost worshipful intensity.
Someone gave me a thumbs up.
Someone stood up to shake my hand. A few young people held up their phones, filming me, shouting, Mr. He, you're awesome. I raised my hand to signal everyone to sit down. Please fasten your seatbelts, everyone. The plane hasn't landed yet.
Safety first.
Ye Zhiqiu was standing in the rear of the cabin. The purser had pulled her aside. A blanket was draped over her shoulders. Her hair was disheveled, and the wound on her knee had been given simple first aid. The makeup on her face was thoroughly ruined, black smudges around her eyes, her lipstick smeared everywhere. She looked like she had been drenched in a rainstorm for 3 hours. She looked at me, a chaotic mix of emotions swirling in her eyes. Shock, fear, anger, grievance, unwillingness, and something unnameable, perhaps remorse, perhaps pleading. Those emotions clashed and churned in her eyes, making her look like a trapped animal. A man in an Armani suit stood up from the front row, blocking my path. It was Lin Yukin. He looked far less dashing than he had earlier in first class. His Patek Philippe was askew on his wrist. The chest of his Armani suit was splattered with a large coffee stain. His hair was a mess, his lazy libertine demeanor shaken apart by the turbulence. But that annoying, self-satisfied smile was still plastered on his face. Mr. He, a pleasure, a pleasure. He extended his hand toward me. I'm Lin Yukin of the Lin Group. I wasn't aware of your status earlier.
My apologies for any neglect.
Since we're both in the same circles, let's look out for each other in the future. I didn't take his hand. His hand hovered awkwardly in the air for several seconds, his smile beginning to stiffen.
Mr.
Lin, I said, where is your seat? First class, row 1, seat A. Then please return to your seat and fasten your seatbelt.
The plane hasn't landed yet?
Any passenger roaming the cabin is a threat to flight safety.
Surely you understand this principle, don't you?
The smile on Lin Yuchen's face collapsed completely. The corner of his mouth twitched a couple of times. He withdrew his unshaken hand and slunk back to first class. I continued toward the rear of the cabin. Passing by Ye Zhiqiu, my footsteps didn't falter. Yanshen. Her voice was tiny, barely audible. But in that moment, everyone in the cabin fell silent. Ears pricked up to hear what would happen between us. I stopped walking but didn't turn around. If you have something to say it after we land, I said.
But let me tell you one thing in advance.
I finally turned and looked her in the eyes.
After we land, you'll be saying it to a lawyer?
The last trace of color drained completely from Ye Zhiqiu's face. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but her lips merely quivered soundlessly. Her body swayed, and the purser quickly reached out to steady her. I turned, walked back to my seat, fastened my seatbelt, and closed my eyes. The plane began its descent. Through the window, the silhouette of Beijing became clearer and clearer. The dense forest of skyscrapers glowed with a golden sheen under the setting sun.
We were about to land.
The plane touched down smoothly on the runway at Beijing Capital International Airport. The moment the landing gear made contact, the fuselage shuddered gently, and then the familiar deceleration pushed everyone forward. A second of silence, And then the cabin erupted into thunderous applause and cheers, louder than the roar of the engines, as if threatening to blow the roof off.
People were crying.
The young mother in the front row with the bleeding forehead held her child, sobbing uncontrollably. The man next to her handed her a tissue. The young man who had been reciting the Heart Sutra pressed his palms together, murmuring under his breath, his face like that of a devout believer who had just crawled out of hell. Strangers embraced across the aisle. After facing such a life and death moment together, everyone had become family. The northeastern woman patted my shoulder, her eyes red.
Young man, no, mister.
Thank you. Truly, thank you. I thought I was going to meet my maker just now. I even typed out a goodbye text to my daughter. You're a good man and good people will be rewarded.
Auntie, you're too kind.
I held her hand. The safe landing is the credit of the entire crew.
I only did what little I could.
Don't be so modest. She slapped my shoulder with surprising strength. I heard what the captain said. You helped them get around that turbulence thing?
Without you, this plane could have been in real trouble.
When I get back, I'll tell all my friends and family. From now on, fly Shengyu Airlines.
An airline run by a boss with a conscience, that's worth trusting.
Several people around chimed in agreement, pulling out their phones, saying they would follow Shengyu Airlines' official social media accounts. The plane taxied for 10 minutes before coming to a final stop beside the jet bridge at Terminal 3. I stood up, retrieved my briefcase from the overhead bin, and prepared to disembark. The passengers spontaneously parted to clear a path for me. Some were still applauding, some gave me thumbs-ups, and a few young people trailed behind me with their phones, filming. At the cabin door, old Joe emerged from the cockpit. He removed his cap and gave me a slight bow.
Take care, mister.
Old Joe, you worked hard.
I patted his shoulder. I'll find you for a private chat later. I want to hear your opinions on the safety management system reform. Old Joe's eyes lit up. I'll be awaiting your call anytime. I turned and walked toward the exit. As I passed Ye Zhiqiu, she finally couldn't hold back any longer. She reached out and grabbed my sleeve. Her hand clutched my cuff tightly, her 5 fingers seeming to embed themselves into the fabric. Her knuckles were white from the force, her nails digging 5 deep creases into the sleeve of my old jacket. Her hand was icy cold, as if just pulled from freezing water.
Yanshen, wait.
Her voice was hoarse like it had been scraped with sandpaper, thick with tears.
You can't just leave like this.
Give me a chance to explain. I'm begging you. Everyone was watching us, the passengers who hadn't yet disembarked, the people packing their belongings, the crew standing by the door, the ground staff on the jet bridge. All eyes were focused on Ye Zhiqiu and me. Phone lenses were like rows of tiny black holes, greedily recording the spectacle. I looked down at her hand gripping my sleeve with such desperation.
What do you want me to explain?
My voice was calm.
Explain why I didn't tell you my true identity for 3 years?
Yes!
Ye Zhiqiu's eyes were red, tears welling up.
You lied to me for 3 years?
You made me think you were a useless small-time clerk.
You made me unable to hold my head up in front of my colleagues. You made me feel like I married the wrong man.
How dare you?
Then let me ask you a question. I cut her off, my voice still low, but each word hammered in like a nail. When you told Lin Yuchen you were unmarried, did it occur to you that you are a married woman? Ye Zhiqiu's mouth opened and closed, then opened and closed again, like a fish thrown onto a riverbank.
When you were flirting with him in first class exchanging WeChat, did you remember your husband was sitting back in economy?
When you were in hotel rooms with other men, did you think about the wedding ring I gave you on your finger? Ye Zhiqiu's face went from white to gray. Her lips trembled violently. She wanted to argue, but all the words were stuck in her throat, unable to come out.
You ask why I hid it from you?
I pried her fingers off my sleeve one by one, the motion slow and steady. Each finger I uncurled was like removing a part that had long since died. The reason is you were never worthy of knowing the truth. When her last finger was peeled away, it was as if all the bones had been pulled from her body. She slumped weakly against the cabin wall, a tiny whimper escaping her throat. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Civil Affairs Bureau. I threw these words over my shoulder and walked into the jet bridge. This time I didn't look back. Behind me came her heart-wrenching screams, the sound bouncing between the metal walls of the jet bridge, becoming distorted and piercing. He Yanshen, you can't do this to me. I'm your wife. I quickened my pace. At the end of the jet bridge, Fang Yan was already waiting with his team. He was dressed in a dark blue bespoke suit, holding a tablet, his expression as serious as a special agent on a military mission. Behind him stood 4 senior executives of Shengyu Airlines, all in formal attire, their expressions respectful.
Mr. Fang Yan stepped forward and lowered his voice.
The videos online have already gone viral. 4 of the top 10 trending topics are related to you. The PR department is asking how to respond. Issue a statement or let it cool down first. Issue a statement. I handed him my briefcase. I'll dictate the content.
You take it down.
First, Shengyu Airlines' newly appointed chairman, He Yanshen, assisted the flight crew in handling an emergency on a flight today. All passengers have landed safely. Second, Shengyu Airlines will immediately begin a comprehensive upgrade of its safety management system, with specific measures to be announced within a week. Third, I paused. Third, my marriage, He Yanshen to Miss Ye Zhiqiu, will be formally dissolved tomorrow. This is a personal matter, and no further comment will be made. Fang Yan's fingers flew across his tablet. After typing the last word, he looked up at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but he asked nothing. Having worked for me for 8 years, he knew perfectly well what to ask and what not to ask. Also, I added, have someone look into Lin Yukin of the Lin Group. He had inappropriate contact with an on-duty flight attendant of Shengyu Airlines on the plane. Have the legal department evaluate whether we need to pursue this.
Understood.
By the time I walked out of the terminal, night was beginning to fall. In Beijing's winter, darkness came especially early. Even though it was just past 5 in the afternoon, the sky had already turned a deep blue, and the navigation lights on the runway were lit up like a row of stars. A black Maybach sent by Shengyu Airlines was waiting at the terminal entrance. The license plate, Jing'a 8888, was exceptionally conspicuous under the lights.
That plate had followed my father for 15 years.
It was the first luxury he bought himself after his business succeeded. He said he chose that number not out of superstition, but to make everyone remember, Shengyu Airlines, prosperity, prosperity, prosperity. But I knew what he truly cared about was never prosperity. What he cared about was that on every takeoff and landing, everyone came home safely. Old Zhao, the chauffeur, stood by the car door.
When he saw me walk over, his eyes instantly reddened.
He was an old-timer at Shengyu, having driven for my father for 20 years, from a sturdy 30-year-old to a man with graying temples.
Mr. He
bowed deeply, his voice choked with emotion.
Welcome back.
You look exactly like the old Mr. He did when he was young. Old Zhao, it's been a while. I patted his shoulder. Get in the car.
Let's go to the company.
The Maybach pulled away smoothly from the airport and merged into the airport expressway traffic. I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes, replaying everything that had happened today in my mind. From the humiliation in economy to the flirtation in first class. From the crisis at 30,000 feet to the joint escape in the cockpit. From Ye Zhiqiu's screams to the applause throughout the cabin. This day had been as long as a century. My phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number, Mr. He. This is Purser Wang Min. Ye Zhiqiu fainted at the airport bus stop and has been taken to the hospital. The doctor says it's nothing serious, just temporary shock from emotional distress and low blood sugar. After she woke up, she kept crying and calling your name. As her colleague, I don't know how to comfort her. I glanced at the message, then deleted it and added the number to my blacklist. Soft-heartedness is the most useless thing. When my father was lying in the ICU, covered in tubes, those he had helped lined up to visit him. Flowers filled the entire hospital corridor. But there were also those who came to the hospital with contracts and agreements trying to kill him while he was down, seeking to carve up the fat piece of meat that was Shengyu while the group was leaderless. From that, I learned one truth. Being soft-hearted toward the unworthy is cruelty toward the worthy. Mr.
Fang Yan's voice came from the passenger seat. We've arrived at headquarters.
I opened my eyes. The Shengyu Airlines headquarters building appeared outside the car window. The building was ablaze with lights. All the senior executives were already lined up at the entrance, waiting. At the entrance to Shengyu Airlines headquarters, 2 rows of senior executives stood in perfect formation, suited and booted, expressions solemn. The moment the car came to a stop, as if manipulated by the same string, they all bowed simultaneously.
Good evening, Mr.
He. The voices were uniform, echoing across the empty plaza for several seconds. I stepped out of the Maybach, my gaze sweeping across every face. Some looked nervous, some awed, some with curious glints in their eyes. After all, before this, apart from a few core executives, no one in Shengyu knew what the new boss looked like. Those mid-level managers must have guessed countless times in their minds. Who was this new chairman? What was his background? What was his story? Probably no one guessed that the new boss was that ordinary small-time clerk who had spent 3 years taking the bus to work, wearing an old jacket, and eating at roadside stalls. At ease, all of you. I waved my hand.
Why are you standing out here in this freezing cold?
Let's talk in the meeting room. The meeting room lights were painfully bright. Both sides of the long mahogany conference table were packed. I sat in the chairman's seat at the head, a seat that had been empty for 3 years. There wasn't a speck of dust on the backrest. The cleaning staff wiped it every day, even when no one sat there. Fang Yan stood behind me, his tablet already queued up with the meeting agenda. 2 items. I got straight to the point without any preamble. First, the acquisition is complete. As of today, Shengyu Airlines is formally integrated under He Asset Management Group. Second, within 1 week, I want to see an initial proposal for the safety management system reform, benchmarked against top international airlines. The budget has no upper limit.
Any questions asked now?
If not, the meeting is adjourned. It's late, everyone go home and rest. Silence hung in the meeting room for a full 10 seconds. Then the operations director cautiously raised his hand. Mr. He, the cost of a complete safety management system overhaul is enormous. The finance department, I said. The budget has no upper limit. I cut him off.
Your job is to list everything that needs to be done.
I'll handle the money. Shengyu has had 12 incidents in 2 years. If we keep cutting costs, the next one won't be an incident. It'll be a disaster. Can you bear that responsibility? The operations director didn't dare say another word. He lowered his head and scribbled furiously in his notebook. Furthermore, I swept my gaze across all the executives present. The issue of excessive flight hours for frontline pilots will be rectified thoroughly starting today. Any pilot whose monthly flight hours exceed the regulation, the deputy general manager in charge will be dismissed immediately. This rule is to be recorded in the meeting minutes right now.
Everyone will sign it.
The atmosphere in the meeting room instantly turned heavy. The faces of several executives visibly changed. Their lips moved as if they wanted to say something, but under my sweeping gaze, they all swallowed their words back down.
Mr.
He, I have one more thing to add. The safety director stood up, his voice trembling slightly. A batch of engine parts is over 200 hours past its replacement cycle. The maintenance department has been applying for the budget repeatedly, but the finance department approved. I looked at the finance director. First thing tomorrow morning, transfer that money. The finance director's expression was a bit sour, but he nodded nonetheless.
Understood, Mr.
He. If there are no other issues, meeting adjourned. The scraping of chair legs against the floor filled the room as the executives filed out. A few glanced back at me as they reached the door, their eyes holding surprise, reverence, and a certain indescribable anticipation. Shengyu had been tormented too badly these past 3 years, like a ship lost in a storm, everyone waiting for someone to take the helm again. Now that man had arrived. The meeting room emptied, leaving just Fang Yan and me. Fang Yan placed his tablet on the table and looked at me, finally asking the question he'd been holding in all day. Mr. He, regarding Ye Zhiqiu, are you really going to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow?
Really?
I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my temples.
Is the divorce agreement ready on the lawyer's side?
Ready?
The legal department worked overtime to rush it out. Fang Yan pulled up the document and handed it to me. The terms are very clear. The party guilty of infidelity leaves the marriage with nothing. All jointly held property under her name reverts solely to you. Additionally, the evidence of her accepting expensive gifts from clients and engaging in unauthorized private interactions with first-class passengers has been compiled and can be handed over to the industry regulatory authorities at any time.
I scanned the divorce agreement.
The terms were clean and sharp, without any loopholes. Shengyu's legal team was famously formidable in the industry. This team had been locked in a year-long battle with opponents during the acquisition, tearing them apart until they were helpless. Handling a divorce case against an unfaithful flight attendant was like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Fine, print this version. Fang Yan nodded, but his expression showed he still had something to say.
Speak your mind, I said, looking at him.
Mr. He, am just a little curious. Fang Yan pushed his glasses up. In these 3 years, you had so many opportunities to tell her the truth.
Why didn't you?
If she had known you were the heir of Shengyu, maybe she wouldn't have cheated? I finished his sentence and shook my head. Fang Yan, you don't understand her. If she knew the truth, she certainly wouldn't have cheated. She would have become the perfect wife. Gentle, considerate, loyal, keeping the house spotless, cooking dinner for me every day. But she wouldn't have loved me. She would have loved the heir of Shengyu. Fang Yan fell silent. When I married her back then, it was because she showed me her truest self. That girl fresh out of flight attendant school, with the ponytail and no makeup. She said she liked me, not because I had money. She didn't even know I had money. I thought that kind of feeling was worth cherishing. It's a pity people change. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at Beijing's nightscape. Or rather, some people were never genuine to begin with. The lights outside the window were like an inverted starry sky. Behind every light was a family, a story. 3 years ago, I thought I could have one of those lights too. A warm home, a woman worthy of a lifetime's trust. Now the light was still there, but the home was gone and the woman had become a stranger. But I didn't feel it was a pity, because these 3 years, rather than a loss, had been a precise filtration. Ye Zhiqiu proved through her own actions that she was unworthy of me. That was more real and thorough than any test I could have devised. A man's greatest luck isn't in meeting someone wonderful, but in seeing someone unworthy clearly while there's still time.
Have the car ready. I turned and picked up my jacket.
Tomorrow morning at 8, we go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Fang Yan was just about to say yes, Mr. He, when the words were cut short by a sudden commotion outside the meeting room door. Someone was screaming in the hallway, someone was trying to restrain them, and there was the sound of high heels clacking rapidly against the marble floor. The sound grew louder and closer, like a runaway train barreling toward the meeting room. The meeting room door was violently shoved open. Ye Zhiqiu stood in the doorway. She had changed clothes, a black professional suit, her hair tied back. The heavy makeup was gone, revealing her original, delicate features. But her eyes were severely swollen, her lips cracked. The wound on her knee still hadn't been properly treated. She looked haggard, as if she had just suffered a major illness. In her hand was a document. The hysteria and collapse from the plane were gone from her eyes, replaced by a bizarre, almost manic calm.
He Yanshen.
She didn't call my name, but used my full name.
We need to talk.
Fang Yan looked at me.
I gestured with my eyes for him to step out. He put away his tablet, sidled past Ye Zhiqiu, and left the meeting room, pulling the door shut behind him. Only the two of us remained in the meeting room.
Speak, I said, leaning back in my chair, my tone as casual as if discussing the weather.
Ye Zhiqiu slapped the document down in front of me. Application for labor arbitration. Her voice was steady, unnaturally so. I know you want to divorce me, and I know you have what you call evidence. But I'm telling you, under labor law, you don't have the right to terminate my labor contract without just cause. I am a formal employee of Shengyu Airlines. If you want me to lose my job, you'll have to see if the law agrees first. I looked down at the application. The wording was professional, the clauses accurately cited, even relevant case precedents listed. This was not something Ye Zhiqiu had written herself. With her level of legal knowledge, she couldn't possibly have produced something like this. She had obviously hired a lawyer, and a pretty good one at that. This woman wasn't stupid. She could even be called clever. She knew she held no cards when it came to the marriage. The evidence of infidelity was solid, and the outcome of leaving with nothing was unchangeable. So she had chosen a different battlefield, one she thought was in her favor.
Labor arbitration.
Her logic was simple. Even if she got divorced, she would keep her job. As long as she remained an employee of Shengyu Airlines, she still had a livelihood, still had status, and wouldn't have lost completely. Moreover, if the labor arbitration succeeded, she could turn around and sue me for compensation on grounds of forced resignation. A clever scheme, but her cleverness was always applied in the wrong place. Are you sure you want to do this? I picked up the application and read through it. The clauses were well cited. The logic had no real flaws, but she had overlooked one fundamental issue. She had no idea what other cards I was still holding.
I am.
Ye Zhiqiu bit her lip, a gesture that reminded me of when she said I do at our wedding 3 years ago, biting her lip then too.
Back then, I found it endearing. Now it was just ironic. He Yanshen, you lied to me for 3 years, made me think I married a loser, let my youth go to waste on you.
Do you think just because you have money, you can do whatever you want?
I'm telling you, even if you're the chairman, you still have to obey the labor law. If you dare to fire me without cause, I'll dare to sue you until you're bankrupt.
Are you finished?
I'm finished. I pulled open a drawer in the conference table, took out a craft paper envelope I had long prepared, placed it on the table and slid it in front of her. Ye Zhiqiu stared at the envelope, cracks beginning to appear in the composure in her eyes.
What is this?
Why don't you open it and find out?
Her fingers trembling, she tore open the envelope seal and poured out a stack of contents. On top were photographs. Dozens of color photographs spanning from 2 years ago to today. The contents of the photos were clearer to her than to anyone. Different hotels, different men, different settings. The one constant was her own face, smiling radiantly, and the wedding ring she had never taken off her left ring finger.
Below the photos were bank transaction records.
Transfer records from Lin Yukin to her, the largest single transfer being 150,000 yuan, totaling over 500,000 over 2 years. The purchase receipt for a Cartier bracelet gifted by a real estate mogul surnamed Zhao. The expense bill for a Maldives vacation paid for by Deputy General Manager Zhou. Every item was crystal clear.
Every item was shocking.
At the very bottom was an investigation report, the cover stamped with the official seal of Shengyu Airlines legal department. Inside, it detailed in full the evidence of Ye Zhiqiu exploiting her position as purser to solicit expensive gifts from first-class clients and engage in improper private interactions. The amounts involved, the times, the locations, the individuals all marked out with absolute clarity, as professional and cold as a business due diligence report. Ye Zhiqiu's face underwent an emotional typhoon within seconds. Her fingers trembled violently. The photos slipped through her fingers and scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Her lips quivered, tears welling up in her eyes, but this time not from fear or grievance, but from the despair of being completely and utterly crushed.
Where did you get these?
My people have been following you for 2.5 years. I stood up and looked down at her, my voice like an ice-cold blade, stabbing her with each word. From the very first month you cheated, I knew. The times you and Lin Yuken booked rooms at the Marriott in Shenzhen Bay. Your trip with that boss Zhao in Sanya. The photos of you wearing your wedding ring with Deputy General Manager Zhou on the Bund in Shanghai. I have them all.
Ye Zhiqiu's body swayed.
Her knees buckled, as if every ounce of strength had been drained from her. Slowly, irrevocably, she sank to her knees on the floor.
And you still want to sue me?
I looked down at her, my voice devoid of anger or triumph. Just a cold, icy calm.
The labor law protects law-abiding workers.
Do you think a flight attendant who exploits her position to hook up with first-class clients and accepts gifts worth over $500,000 is still considered a worker protected by the labor law?
That application of yours? Don't even mention labor arbitration.
Even if you took it to court, a judge would dismiss it immediately upon seeing this evidence. Ye Zhiqiu's voice completely shattered. She knelt on the floor, the sound of her knees hitting the marble echoing dully. Yanshen, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. Give me one more chance? A chance? I let out a short, soft laugh, but in the empty meeting room it sounded exceptionally harsh. Did you ever give me a chance? Ye Zhiqiu's sobs caught in her throat. When I married you 3 years ago, I genuinely wanted to live a good life with you for the rest of my life. You had no money, no background, no high education.
I didn't care.
I thought as long as you were a good person, nothing else mattered. But what did you do? I crouched down and looked at her tear-streaked face. You started betraying me from the 3rd month. Not a year later, not 2 years later. The 3rd month.
You couldn't even wait 3 months.
She knelt there, trembling uncontrollably, tears falling like beads from a broken string, splashing into tiny puddles on the floor. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out except meaningless, tearful gasps. So tell me, a woman who couldn't wait 3 months, why should I give her a second chance? I straightened up, picked up the divorce agreement from the table, and placed it on the floor in front of her. Tomorrow morning at 9, Civil Affairs Bureau.
You can choose not to show up.
Then I'll submit this agreement along with all the evidence of your infidelity to the court and file for a litigated divorce. By then, not only will you not get a single cent, but you'll also be blacklisted in the aviation industry and never be able to work as a flight attendant again for the rest of your life. Yanshen, she reached out to grab my pant leg. I stepped back, avoiding her hand. It's Mr. He. With those words, I pushed open the door and walked out of the meeting room. In the hallway, Fang Yan was leaning against the wall waiting, a look of long-anticipated understanding on his face. He asked nothing, just handed me a freshly brewed cup of hot tea. The car is ready, Mr. He. Also, Lin Yuken of the Lin Group sent word through an intermediary, wanting to invite you to dinner to apologize. I declined, saying Mr. He has no time. Well done. I took the teacup and sipped. The scalding liquid slid down my throat, exploding into a ball of warmth in my stomach. As I walked out of the Shengyu headquarters main entrance, I looked up at the night sky. In Beijing, it was rare to see any stars. In this heavily light-polluted city, every visible star was exceptionally precious. I thought of my father's words. Yanshen, remember, the U in Shengyu doesn't mean the universe. It's the eve without the wood. People in aviation can't give others a house, but we can give them a shelter. At 30,000 feet, the airplane is their shelter. What you have to do is make sure that shelter never collapses.
Father, I did it.
And I will do it even better. The next morning, at exactly 8 o'clock, the black Maybach pulled up punctually at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. A Beijing winter morning was piercingly cold. Exhaled breath instantly turned to white mist that hung in the air. The bureau hadn't opened yet, but a dozen or so couples were already lined up outside. Some held hands sweetly, probably there for a fake divorce to buy property. Others stood far apart, ignoring each other, their eyes full of resentment and exhaustion, clearly there for the real thing. The appearance of the Maybach silenced everyone for 3 seconds. The Jing'e 8888 license plate gleamed coldly in the morning light, like a silent signboard. When I stepped out, people started whispering.
Hey, look at that guy. Isn't he the one from the news yesterday? The chairman on the plane.
Yeah, that's him.
I was up all night watching the videos. His wife is that flight attendant who called him poor on the plane, and it turned out he's the airline's boss. My God, it's better than a TV drama. Did his wife come?
Did that flight attendant show up?
I ignored it all and walked straight toward the bureau's entrance. Fang Yan had already made a call in advance, and the bureau had opened a special fast-track channel, skipping the queue. The staff member handling the divorce proceedings was a middle-aged woman in her 40s, wearing a pair of reading glasses, her expression as indifferent as a stagnant pool of water. She had worked at the bureau for 20 years and had seen more divorcing couples than cabbages in a market. She was long immune to any bizarre story. Ye Zhiqiu arrived at 8:58. She came alone. No lawyer, no family or friends. She wore a black overcoat, her hair loose and only a thin layer of light makeup on her face. But it couldn't hide her swollen, red-rimmed eyes and her haggard complexion. She looked like she hadn't slept a wink all night, the dark circles under her eyes as thick as ink stains. When she walked in, everyone's eyes focused on her. Those in line, those handling paperwork, those passing by, the same word was written in all their gazes, rubbernecking.
He Yanshen.
She stopped in front of me, her voice hoarse like sandpaper.
Sit.
I pointed to the chair opposite me. She sat down, her hands resting on her knees, her nails digging into her palms. Her gaze fell on the divorce agreement on the table. I had had Fang Yan printed out last night, 3 copies, black and white, terms clear, missing only the final signatures.
Sign it.
I pushed a pen in front of her. Ye Zhiqiu didn't pick it up immediately. She stared at the agreement for a long time, so long that the staff member beside us tapped the table impatiently.
He Yanshen, I have one last question.
She looked up at me, tears beginning to pool in her eyes again. But this time, she didn't let them fall. With an almost stubborn force, she held them in her eyes, refusing to let them roll down.
Ask.
In these 3 years, did you ever truly love me? Even for one day? Even for 1 minute? Her voice was trembling, but her gaze did not waver. Those eyes that had once moved my heart were now red as a rabbit's, a mixture of pleading, resentment, and a strange, desperate hope, like a condemned prisoner waiting for one last drink before the execution. I looked at her for a long time. Many images flashed through my mind. Her dancing in her uniform at the flight attendant's school graduation 3 years ago.
Her crying I do at the wedding.
The first time I celebrated her birthday. How she was moved to tears. Those images were once the most precious treasures in my memory.
Looking back now, they were all covered in a layer of dust.
I did, I said.
Truly loved you.
At least before I knew the truth. Ye Zhiqiu's tears finally fell. 1 drop, then 2, then like a breached dam, unstoppable. She lowered her head, her shoulders heaving violently, letting out suppressed sobs.
Then why didn't you tell me who you really are?
She cried, her voice muffled through her fingers. Why didn't you tell me you were the heir of Shengyu? If you had told me earlier, maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I was forced by that sense of disparity. Maybe I was just too disappointed. I might not have really wanted to betray you, Ye Zhiqiu. I cut her off, my voice very calm. Stop making excuses for yourself before you sign. Her crying halted for an instant. Cheating is cheating. It wasn't because of disappointment, or disparity, or because I didn't tell you who I was. You cheated because you chose to cheat.
When you were in hotel rooms with other men while wearing your wedding ring, what you were feeling was excitement, not disappointment.
When you took Lin Yuchen's 500,000 yuan in transfers, what you were feeling was greed, not disparity.
Ye Zhiqiu's sobs stopped entirely. She stared at me blankly, the tear tracks on her face reflecting a pale, harsh light. If you had known my true identity, you wouldn't have cheated, not because you loved me, but because you couldn't bear to part with Shengyu's money. I don't want that kind of loyalty. I pushed the pen toward her once more, the tip pointing at the blank space for the wife's signature.
Sign it.
Ye Zhiqiu's hand trembled as if sifting grain, but she eventually picked up the pen. The nib landed on the paper, pausing for a long while, and then, slowly, as if summoning every ounce of strength in her body, she wrote her name. Ye Zhiqiu. 3 characters, crooked and broken, the ink flow intermittent.
It looked less like a signature and more like a last testament.
Then the second copy, and the third. After signing all three, she put the pen down. As if completely emptied, she slumped limply back in her chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. I signed He Yanshen on each of the three agreements in turn, the strokes clean and sharp, as neat as a knife cut. The staff member took the agreements, inspected them, logged it into the system, then picked up the red official seal and stamped it heavily on the bottom right corner of each copy. Thud, thud, thud. 3 sealing sounds announced the complete and utter end of this marriage. The staff member pushed the divorce certificates over, small green booklets with the embossed golden national emblem on the cover. I took one and pushed the other toward Ye Zhiqiu. Take it! From now on, you have no relationship with Shengyu and no relationship with me. Ye Zhiqiu reached out to take it. The moment her fingers touched the green booklet, it was as if she had been burned. She yanked her hand back sharply. She tried a second time before she managed to grasp the divorce certificate with trembling hands.
And this?
I pulled a piece of paper from my briefcase and placed it in front of her.
Your voluntary resignation letter?
Once you sign this, your labor contract with Shengyu Airlines is formally terminated. I will not hand over the evidence of your infidelity to the industry regulators, and you will not be blacklisted.
Where you choose to fly in the future is your own business.
Ye Zhiqiu looked at the resignation letter, a smile that was uglier than crying twisting the corners of her mouth. So you even paved a retreat path for me. Her voice was light and airy, as if drifting from far away.
He Yanshen, you are truly ruthless to the bone.
This isn't ruthlessness. I stood up and buttoned my suit jacket.
This is decency.
The last shred of decency in leaving you. Trembling, Ye Zhiqiu signed her name on the resignation letter. With all formalities completed, I turned and walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Behind me, in the hallway, came the sound of Ye Zhiqiu's suppressed weeping, echoing through the empty corridor like a wordless elegy. Outside, the sunlight was so dazzling it was hard to open my eyes. Beijing's winter sun had little warmth, but it was bright enough to leave one nowhere to hide. The Maybach was waiting at the curb. Old Zhao opened the door for me.
Mr.
He back to the company or home? To the company.
I got into the back seat.
There are still 2 meetings today, and this afternoon I have to meet with the Saudi Airlines delegation. The Maybach slowly pulled away from the Civil Affairs Bureau. In the rear-view mirror, the bureau building shrank smaller and smaller until it disappeared among the traffic and buildings. My phone buzzed. A message from Fang Yan. Mr. He, the PR department, has issued the divorce statement. Trending number 3. Shengyu Airlines chairman's low-key divorce. The public opinion direction is largely positive. Sympathy points maxed out. I read it and replied with a single word, good. Then I rolled down the window and let the cold wind rush in. The wind hit my face like a fine knife, cutting and painful, but also exceptionally sobering. A 3-year marriage, like a long dream. Now, the dream was over. 1 month later, Shengyu Airlines held a press conference. The venue was the largest multifunction hall at Shengyu headquarters, capable of seating 500 people. But the number of media present today far exceeded that. The aisles, the doorways, even the corridors outside were packed with journalists shouldering cameras and holding microphones. The number of people watching online simultaneously had surpassed 30 million. I stood at the podium, facing the dense dark mass of people below and the incessantly flashing lights, and took a deep breath. Today's press conference was my first public appearance since taking over Shengyu. All sorts of rumors about me had been fermenting online for over a month. Truth and falsehood flying everywhere. Some labeled me a business genius. Some portrayed me as a tragic hero who had endured hardships to achieve his goal. Others said I had deliberately laid out a 3-year plot just for publicity. Various versions of the biography of He Yanshen had gone viral online, racking up hundreds of millions of total reads. Today I was going to let everyone hear the true story. Friends from the media, good morning. I spoke. My voice amplified through the microphone to fill the entire hall. I am He Yanshen, chairman of Shengyu Airlines. At today's press conference, I want to announce 3 things. The flashlights flickered faster, like a field of white fireworks continuously exploding. First, I raised one finger. Shengyu Airlines is launching the Safety First Reform Initiative, effective immediately. Over the next 3 years, we will invest 5.2 billion yuan in fleet upgrades, maintenance system rebuilding, and pilot training system optimization. From today onward, Shengyu Airlines safety standards will benchmark against Emirates and Singapore Airlines, ensuring that every passenger who chooses Shengyu enjoys world-class flight safety assurance. Warm applause rose from the audience. Those veteran aviation journalists knew best what 5.2 billion meant. It was the largest single safety investment ever made by a private domestic airline. Second, I raised a second finger. I hereby officially announce that Shengyu Airlines has entered into a strategic cooperation agreement with Saudi Airlines. The two sides will jointly develop golden routes connecting the Middle East and East Asia. The first route will officially open in June of this year. This is a major step for Shengyu Airlines into the international market, and a new starting point for Chinese private aviation going global. The applause grew louder. News of the Saudi cooperation had been kept confidential until now. The journalists pounded furiously on their keyboards, and the live stream comments flew past in a blur. Third, I paused and swept my gaze across the entire audience. The hall fell silent. Everyone was waiting. The third matter is a personal one, I said. Recently, there has been a lot of discussion about me online. Some is true, some is false. Here, I only want to say one thing. I am my father's son. Everything I have done is solely to be worthy of the name Shengyu. A second of silence and then thunderous applause erupted. After the press conference ended, old Joe came to find me. He had specially changed into a brand new captain's uniform. The 4 stripes on his epaulets were polished to a shine, and his leather shoes were buffed. He looked energized, as if he had shed 10 years. In his hand was a craft paper envelope, its edges worn and frayed, clearly many years old.
Mr.
I wanted to give this to you in person.
His voice trembled slightly. In the 15 years I had known him, this was the first time I had seen him like this. I took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a photograph, yellowed with age, its edges slightly curled. The photo showed 2 men standing side by side in front of an aircraft's boarding stairs, wearing flight jackets, their smiles bright and sunny. The younger one was old Zhou, back then still a green youth, his hair thick, his face full of collagen. The older one had a ramrod straight back, piercing eyes and a reassuring smile at the corner of his mouth. It was my father. On the back of the photo in blue fountain pen was written a line, March 1998.
A photo with brother Ye Yanshen.
Wishing you safe takeoffs and landings. Jianhua. A sudden sour ache filled my eyes. Your father was the most remarkable pilot I have ever met in my life. Old Zhu's voice grew hoarse. 15 years ago, during that emergency landing, I was on duty at the control tower and listened to the entire communication recording. Both engines had failed. Altitude was only 9,000 feet, and he was still on the channel, joking, saying, "Old Zhou, when I land, you owe me a drink." Do you know why he was so calm? Because he knew that if he panicked, everyone was finished, I said. Old Zhou nodded. A tear finally rolled down from the corner of his eye. This old captain, who had flown for 25 years, who had faced countless dangers without ever shedding a tear, wept in front of me.
Mr.
Your father could never fly again after that. He told me that his greatest regret wasn't anything else, but that he couldn't be there to see you take over Shengyu with his own eyes. Now that you are here, up there in heaven, he must be able to see it. I was silent for a long time. Outside the window, a Shengyu Airlines jet was lifting off the runway, its white fuselage gleaming under the sunlight, like a silver eagle spreading its wings. It flew higher and higher, farther and farther, until it became a tiny white dot in the sky and disappeared above the clouds. As I walked out of the conference hall, Fang Yan caught up to me and handed me a phone.
Mr. There is some news.
Ye Zhiqiu had someone pass along a request this morning.
She wants to see you?
What about? She didn't say.
But based on her situation, after the divorce, she went back to her hometown. All the wealthy friends she made before have completely cut ties with her. Lin Yuchen has distanced himself. Boss Zhao has blacklisted her. Deputy General Manager Zhou won't even take her calls. Her father is in poor health and has been hospitalized, requiring a significant sum for medical expenses. I hear she's been looking for work everywhere, but Fang Yan paused. No airline is willing to hire her.
Her license wasn't blacklisted.
Why would no company want her?
Fang Yan glanced at me, choosing his words carefully. Because everyone knows who she is now. Those videos online, the clip of her calling you poor on the plane, and the clip of her with Lin Yuchen in first class, have collectively garnered over 200 million views. No airline is willing to hire a flight attendant who cheated on her husband because she thought he was poor and was subsequently ridiculed by the entire internet. It would damage the company's image. I was silent for a few seconds. The wind blew from the direction of the jet bridge, carrying a faint smell of aviation fuel. That smell had been with me since childhood. To me, it was the smell of home. No need to respond to her request. I handed the phone back to Fang Yan. Also, have someone look into her father's hospitalization situation. As for the medical expenses, help out anonymously.
Don't let her know it was me.
Fang Yan paused, taken aback.
Mr.
Are you? It's not soft-heartedness.
I cut him off.
It's closure. I pulled open the car door and sat in the back of the Maybach. Fang Yan didn't ask any more questions. He knew my character too well. A decision once made required no explanation.
Night fell.
The lights of Chang'an Avenue flowed past the car window like a river of gold. This city was never dark at night. A million lights and brilliant neon turned it into a city that never slept. I leaned back in my seat. Many images surfaced in my mind. The wedding 3 years ago, Ye Zhiqiu in her white veil smiling at me. Half a year ago, her silhouette as she slammed the door and left. On the plane, her clutching my sleeve saying, "I'm scared." And today, that yellowed old photograph, my father's smile. All the images intertwined, flowing like a river through every node of my life.
My phone vibrated.
A message from Fang Yan. Saudi Airlines has raised their offer again. The latest bid is 42 billion. They're asking for a response within a week. I replied with one word, negotiate. Then I rolled down the window and let the night wind rush in. The winter wind was cold. A cold that invigorated the spirit. The road ahead was long, so long you couldn't see the end. The lights on both sides grew denser and brighter, like an endless runway waiting for the next takeoff. I suddenly remembered my father's words. The sky is high and the earth is vast.
Soar as you wish.
Father, this time, I'm going to fly to heights you never reached. And Ye Zhiqiu, she is nothing more than an insignificant footnote in this story. My story has only just begun.